Hello, and welcome to this very quick introduction to what is known as Fitt's Law. This is an important part of applied cognitive science, cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience, pick your area, in which I will be discussing how movement times, that is when you move your hand from one location to another, are affected by the distance you have to travel and the size of the target. This has really important implications for computer interface design, and a number of you will be able to identify places where design has not taken Fitt's Law into account. So let's first introduce this idea of what we call human factors. Human factors is the study of how humans behave physically and psychologically in relation to particular environments, products, or services. Basically, it's how we interact with things. So everything from computers to doors to cars to refrigerators to nuclear power plants are all things in which we have to take into account the fact that a human is involved in interacting with that technology. And there is a lot of really interesting scholarship and popular work in this area. Donald Norman has a terrific book called The Design of Everyday Things. You should also check out the Human Factors blog from Rich Pack at Clemson University. Really terrific stuff regarding how human factors works. So the things we have to consider are how do we interact with things and how do things influence our behavior. One of the things that Donald Norman points out in his book and also Rich Pack talks about in his blog is really it's generally not the user's fault. When a design goes awry, it's the fact that it's a bad design. Many of you may have tried to get in or out of a door and can't figure out where you're supposed to push or pull or whatever it is you're supposed to do because it's a bad design. Similarly, things like elevators, cars, all sorts of different types of technology really influence how, or really fail to take into account the human being involved that's supposed to be operating this thing. And so it's an important consideration. So a significant portion of human factors work is in what we call human-computer interaction. Obviously, we're all interacting with computers right now of one sort or another. Your phone, laptop, tablet, all of those are human-computer interaction types of technology. And so part of what we'll be talking about is particularly relevant to that area. So one of the things to understand about human-computer interaction is we're dealing with what we call sensorimotor integration. So our senses help us to calibrate our motor movements. And in fact, it's a fairly complicated set of neural structures that help calibrate our motor movements. Our visual system in particular helps guide our movements. And so Fitt's Law we're going to be talking about is primarily a visual motor interaction type of technology. We also, of course, receive somatosensory information. Proprioception is a sense of the relative position of one's own parts of the body and strength of effort being employed in a movement. And there are lots of various body parts that and sensory systems that are tied into proprioception. But think of it this way. When you reach down to pick up, say, a paper coffee cup, say your Starbucks to-go coffee cup, your proprioceptive system is what calibrates your movement to reach and grab it, and also to calibrate the strength of your grip so that you pick up the cup and don't drop it, but don't crush it. And so there's a lot of interaction between your sensory motor systems to calibrate that kind of movement. Different sort of ballistic type of movement is when you go to catch a ball or to swing a bat at a ball. That sort of thing. All of these are tied into this kind of technology. These types of sensory motor systems. So haptic feedback is that touch feedback to provide additional information for your sensory system. So when we talk about haptic feedback, when you grab that coffee cup, you get some of that feedback based on the cup itself, etc. Similarly, some of you may have tried to turn a doorknob, and if it's a sticky doorknob, right, you have to turn it harder, but you're also maybe afraid of breaking it, so you're trying to figure out if it's locked or not. Some of you, like me, have probably stood outside a bathroom you thought was locked, but it just turns out you didn't turn the handle hard enough. All of that is haptic feedback. Part of modern technology is trying to provide haptic feedback in technological systems. And there are a variety of ways this might happen. So, for example, a number of cars provide haptic feedback. If you drift out of your lane, it will actually shake the wheel a little bit, like you've hit some of those rumble strips. That would be a type of haptic feedback. So that gets us to Fitt's law. Broadly speaking, Fitt's law relates to movement time and accuracy in human-computer interaction, or really any kind of technological interaction. It's used to predict how long it will take you to move to a location and how accurately you can move to a location based on two parameters: how far the target is away and the size of the target. And this actually is an important consideration in designing different types of technology. So if you think about when you are using that self-checkout at the grocery store, some of you may have actually hit the wrong button because it was the larger button, because your eye is automatically drawn to it, and it's simply where you automatically go to because you think that's the key button you're supposed to hit. And so that kind of touchscreen technology can be altered by changing the position of a target button and the size of a target button in terms of your ability to accurately move your finger from one place to the other. So Fitt's law predicts that movement time will be based on what we call an index of difficulty. And that index of difficulty takes into account target size and distance. So the index of difficulty is the log to the base 2 of 2 times the target, distance to the target, and the size of the target. A W stands for width, I think, is what they're talking about here. And so this particular law is very consistent in terms of predicting both your accuracy and the time it will take you to move to a particular target location. So for my students, you're going to need a timer, and you'll want to download the Fitt's law demonstration from Canvas. You're going to run through the task twice, once measuring accuracy and once measuring movement time. For the accuracy trials, you will count the number of taps in 10 seconds following the instructions in the tapping task sheet. And for movement time, you will time how long it takes to tap back and forth 20 times. You'll then enter your data on Canvas. I want to show you what this data looks like from previous semesters. And so here we have the accuracy of individuals moving from one location to the other based on the index of difficulty. You can see the accuracy decreases pretty dramatically as the index of difficulty goes up, so accuracy goes down. If we look then at movement time, how long it takes on average to move from one location to the other, again, fairly consistently moving straight up in a relatively linear fashion, it increases in movement time based on the index of difficulty. And so it takes longer, almost, well, it's about not quite twice as long, but close, and as we move from the index of difficulty of 2 to an index of difficulty of 8. And so this allows us to relatively easily predict how accurate and how long it will take someone to move from one location to the other, to move their mouse from one location to the other. All right, that's a quick introduction to Fitt's law.